If you have an engineering background and you want to break into consulting, then you came to the right spot. In this video, I'm going to teach you the exact steps that you have to follow if you want to land a top consulting role. I'm going to show you everything from building your list of firms to reaching out to people on LinkedIn, sharpening your application material, and also acing your interview. Oh, and if you're new here, hi, my name is Ziad. I'm a former engineer who transitioned into consulting and business strategy, and I'm also an incoming student at Harvard Business School. Not too long ago, I was exactly in your shoes. I was studying industrial engineering at Northeastern University, and I have since received offers at both BCG and Bain. So in this video, I want to share with you the exact steps that I took and the ones that you should take as well if you want to make that transition from engineering into consulting. Okay, so let's get started. Step number 1, the list. Before you go too deep into things, it's important to have a strategy and a target. And the strategy that I usually recommend for people to follow is to cast a wide net. What I see a lot of people do, especially the engineers, they'll apply to 2 to 3 firms and then they may not get an interview at that firm and then ultimately not make that transition from engineering to consulting. If you want to increase your chances, I would highly recommend that you apply to at least 15 different firms. Yes, you heard me correctly, 15 different firms. For example, here's the exact list that I had for myself. First, I applied to the 3 MBBs, McKinsey, BCG, and Bain. I also applied to the Big 4, which are PwC, Deloitte, EY, and KPMG. I applied to Tier 2 consulting firms like Oliver Wyman, Carney, and LEK. I applied to tech consulting jobs at Accenture, Booz Allen, and Capgemini. And lastly, I also applied to a couple small boutiques like Simon Kucher and Keystone Strategy. Now, you don't have to follow this exact list, but I think the main takeaway here is that you should have at least 15 different firms that you apply to. There are a couple other firms that I would also recommend applying to, like Roland Berger, FTI Consulting, Putnam Associates, and the list goes on. The list is going to vary depending on geography and your own interest, but feel free to use my own list as a starting point. Now that you have your list, let's move on to step number 2, and that is understanding the deadlines. Unlike a lot of engineering firms, consulting firms don't recruit a couple weeks before the start date. In fact, most consulting firms will recruit 6 months and sometimes even up to a year before the start date. So if you're looking to break into consulting this next year, the deadline might actually be around the corner in the next couple weeks or the next couple months. And this is one thing that trips up a lot of the engineers, including myself. For the first couple times I was recruiting into consulting, I actually missed the deadline because I did not know how early they were recruiting. So honestly, I think one of the best things that you can do right now is go into each of the websites and look at when the deadlines are going to be. I can tell you right now that a lot of the firms have their deadlines open for the next summer cycle and also for the next winter cycle. Most consulting companies are pretty open about their deadlines, so I would just go onto the website, see when the deadline is for the specific role you're interested in, and I would add it to that Excel list with all of the different firms that you're applying to. Okay, but now let's get into the actual fun stuff. A lot of you are probably wondering, as an engineer, how do I actually convince the consulting firm to give me an interview? And luckily, there are true and tried methods. The number one thing that you should do is doing LinkedIn outreach. So for you to get the interview, what I recommend is reaching out to at least 100 people on LinkedIn. Ideally, you want those people to be engineers. You can expect close to a 3% response rate, so you can expect 3 people out of the 100 that you reached out to actually respond and hop on a call with you. In the world of engineering, networking is not as common. However, in the world of consulting, it is super important for you to network with people and get your name out there. Think about it this way. A lot of the consulting firms are receiving over 1,000 different applications for only a dozen spots. And a lot of these applications are very strong candidates with really good GPAs and really good work experience. So one of the best ways for you to stand out is for you to actually have a referral. And the only way for you to get a referral is for you to chat with consultants who are currently at those firms and very directly ask them if they would be willing to submit a referral. A quick statistic here is people who have a referral have close to a 5 times higher chance of getting the interview compared to people who do not have a referral. Now, if you want the exact script that I use and that I recommend that you use for the cold outreach on LinkedIn, then you can go ahead and check it in the description below. I left it for you guys completely for free. Now, a quick bonus tip for you here. If reaching out on LinkedIn is not your main cup of tea, then I highly recommend that you attend networking events. These networking events could be at your local consulting club at the university that you are attending, but if you're a working professional, a lot of companies like PwC, BCG, Deloitte are hosting like networking events and get-togethers, coffee chats, just to get to know professionals like yourself. So I would highly recommend that you attend those, bring your resume and cover letter so that people can review those and get your name and potentially also get you a referral. And now, speaking of resume and cover letter, let's move on to the next step, and that is sharpening your application material. Now, while getting a referral is going to definitely increase your chances tremendously of getting the interview, even if you have a referral but you don't have a strong application, it's not a guarantee that you're going to get the interview. So it's best to have a resume and a cover letter that meets exactly their expectations and what they're looking for in a consulting industry. Now, let's start off with the resume. On the resume, the biggest mistake that I see a lot of the engineers do is focus very specifically on the technical details of their work. And while I think that would be very impressive for an engineering and a technical role, a lot of the consulting roles do not necessarily require you to have like strong Python skills or know how to do SolidWorks or some like very niche engineering skill. Instead, what they want to know is the impact of the work that you're doing. And that's why I highly recommend that you follow a framework called the RAC framework. And RAC stands for Results, Action, Quantification. So in your resume bullet points, instead of saying specifically all of the cool technical actions that you have done, instead start with the result of those actions. So now let's say that you built a new mechanical device that minimizes waste in the manufacturing process of the company that you work for. A weak resume bullet point would sound something like this. Built a mechanical device called X that minimizes waste, and I used SolidWorks in doing so. Here, it focuses a lot on the action, and then you're going into some details around using SolidWorks and maybe some of the libraries you use there, and that's not very relevant to the consulting firm. Instead, you want to start off with the result. What was the result of you building that machine? It was minimizing waste, and what was the result of you minimizing waste? It's you saved the company maybe $2 million. So I would actually start with that. So a strong bullet point would look something like this. Saved the company $2 million by designing a new mechanical device that eliminated 30 kilograms of waste. Notice again, the RAC framework. I start with the result, then I spoke about the specific action that I've done, and lastly, I focused on the quantification, the $2 million and the 30 kilograms. If you want more detail about how to perfect your resume bullet points, then I've actually made a video that I linked right here, and I left it below in the description, so go check it out. Now, the resume alone is not going to be enough. You also need the cover letter. So on the cover letter, one of the things that I see a lot of people do mistakes on, especially the engineers, is they talk about how much they hate their engineering job, and that's why they want to move and go into consulting. And instead, here's the framework that I recommend for all of the engineers. If you do want to increase your chances tremendously, I think what's better to do is talk about how much you've actually loved your time in engineering, and then just identify maybe 1 to 2 gaps that engineering does not give you that consulting will give you instead. Keep this in mind. A lot of the consulting firms actually want the engineers. They want your technical ability. They want your analytical skills. They want to see how good you are at quantitative thinking. And that's something that you want to lean into a little bit more, not shy away from. Now, regarding your cover letter, the exact framework that I use and that I recommend that you use as well is focusing on scaling your impact. And that's why you want to make the transition from engineering into consulting. I would say something along the lines of, while I enjoyed my time in engineering creating A, B, C, and D, I found that my impact was very limited. And I want to be able to take the same technical ability that I have and scale my impact to a broader audience, to a broader market. And that's why I want to make the transition into consulting. I've also made a very detailed video about how I would write a cover letter for consulting purposes that I linked right here, and it's also below in the description, so feel free to go ahead and check it out. Now, before we continue into the interview stage, let's do a quick recap of everything that we've covered to increase your chances of getting the interview itself. Number 1, make sure that you apply to at least 15 firms. Number 2, make sure that you know all the deadlines through the website. Number 3, make sure that you get a referral. And then number 4, make sure that you sharpen your application material on both the resume and the cover letter. So hopefully by now, if you've followed all of these steps, you're increasing your chances tremendously of getting the interview. Now let's say you followed all of these things and now you finally landed your interview. What do you do from here? As an engineer, one of the benefits that you have in one of your strong suits is your analytical ability. However, where I've seen a lot of the engineers fall through is on the creativity side of things. It's usually not the math that trips up a lot of the engineers. It's not the analytical analysis of the charts. Rather, it's thinking about the business solutions. It's thinking about how to creatively answer some of the questions and to stand out. The other thing that I see a lot of the engineers struggle with are the business concepts and the structure. Now, let's talk about how to solve for both of those things. Starting with number 1, and that is the creativity. Here, what you want to do is actually bucket your answers into different categories and then list all of the different solutions that can come within a specific category. For example, if you are asked the question, how would you save the company X million dollars? Instead of just listing all the different solutions that you can think of or going too deep into one very technical solution, what I would do is take a step back and maybe put 3 different buckets. For example, here's what I would say. Maybe there's something that we can do on the technology side, there's something we can do on the people side, and then there's something we can do on the process side. On the technology side, maybe we can implement a new AI solution that can identify waste and save costs. On the people side, maybe we can restructure the org, and instead of having a lot of very highly paid executives at the director and the vice president level, maybe we can be a lot more focused on having more junior level people at the analyst or manager level. On the process side, maybe we're spending a lot of time doing like reviews and quality control, and there could be a chance to streamline the process a little bit and skip some of the additional steps that we're currently doing. All of these would be different ways in which we can cut costs. Notice how by just creating buckets for different things, I was able to answer the solution in a much more holistic and comprehensive way. Now, as an engineer, I want you to remember that a lot of the people are looking into the technical side of things. So actually, one of your benefits would be to look at the non-technical side, because I know that you're going to answer the technical side very well. So when you ask the question, try to think of also the non-technical side of things. And now what about number 2, and that is the business concepts and the structure. Here, my top recommendation is just to use frameworks. I know a lot of people out there will say, don't use a generic framework, but honestly, I think that frameworks were one of the things that helped me the most, and I didn't have to recreate the wheel. There are only 5 specific frameworks that I used that helped me actually ace a lot of my case interviews. The first one is the profitability framework. The second one is the market sizing framework. The third one is the market entry framework. The fourth one is the mergers and acquisitions framework, or M&A framework. And the fifth and last one is the principal component analysis framework. I will not be digging too deep into what these frameworks actually do and what they mean. I've actually created another video that talks about these frameworks in a lot more detail, and I also left it linked below if you do want to check it out. But in essence, think of the framework as essentially your path to solving the problem. You create like a chart that shows, okay, profitability, I want to look at revenue and costs. That is essentially your map. You start looking at revenue first and you dig a lot deeper to find the problem with revenue, and then you go into cost and then you dig a lot deeper to find the problem with cost, and that ultimately will solve the profitability side of things. Now, the advice that I'm about to give for interviews is the same that would apply to engineers or non-engineers, and that is to just do as many cases as you possibly can. A number that I typically recommend is 20 to 30 cases. It's best to do 5 cases of each of the different types. So 5 profitability, 5 market sizing, 5 market entry, 5 M&A, and then 5 broad public sector cases. I think the biggest thing that stops people from getting the offer is self-doubt. A lot of the engineers say that I don't have the business concepts for me to succeed, but I remember what a close mentor of mine said, which is, it's much easier to learn the business concepts than to learn the technical analytical ability. So think of this, you already have a pretty big advantage by knowing a lot of the technical stuff and also being very strong analytically and quantitatively. So learning the business concepts is really not going to take you that long. If you do want help breaking into consulting, feel free to reach out to me directly on LinkedIn or to check out my Stan store where I offer one-on-one coaching for people. I'm wishing you all the best of luck in this recruiting season. If you have any questions, as always, please feel free to reach out. This is all I have for today, and I'll catch you in the next one.